So I was actually kicked out of therapy many years ago. More like invited not to come back, as they say. But I was seeing this therapist for a couple months, and it wasn't my first therapist that I ever saw, but I was seeing her for a couple months. And, I'd go in and every week we'd talk about, my abandonment issues with my dad and my struggles with jealousy and insecurity in my relationships. And every week I'd say, okay, I promise her and me, like, all right, I'm going to let that stuff go with my dad. I'm going to be more secure in my relationship. I'm going to tell myself positive things every day. But every week I would fail. I would go right back to the same thoughts that everybody's, better than me, smarter than me, prettier than me, funnier than me, all of those things that we tell ourselves.
That's my good friend, Shanenn Bryant. Oh, folks, you don't want to miss this episode. If you're struggling with jealousy or insecurity, we unpack where it comes from, how to deal with it, and how it affects your leadership. So stay with me. You're going to love this candid conversation. What if the only thing standing in the way of changing your life was having the confidence you need? I've found there's 3 areas you need to be confident in order to succeed: your mind, your faith, and your leadership. One or all 3 of these areas will always be in play. You are listening to Call to Confidence. I'm your host, Sharon Hughes, and confidence looks good on you.
Dale Carnegie of Orange County is proud to sponsor the Call to Confidence podcast. Dale Carnegie is a world-class training organization focused on leadership, communication, presentations, and sales. We help people take command of their lives through taking command of their work.
Shanenn, I am so excited to have you on the show. Welcome to Call to Confidence.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here.
Well, you and I talked a couple months ago, and I knew that we were just 2 peas in a pod. We hit it off and we went down so many little rabbit trails. So I just know our conversation today is going to be so beautifully organic and full of things that women need to hear.
Oh, for sure. I agree. I'm excited for it.
You know what I love is, first of all, you are seriously the type of person that it's like your next door neighbor, your best friend over coffee, the person that would have been your college roommate, but you're also this total rock star coach. You have a podcast. I just want to get into all things Shanenn today, but let's start off with Top Self. That is the name of your show and your website. How did you create Top Self?
It's interesting because sometimes people will say top shelf instead of
Mhm.
top self. And I just laugh and giggle when they say that because it is somewhat how I created the name for my company. So it's Top Self is a self-development company. And I offer coaching courses and community in that company. And then, of course, I have the podcast. But it came from me having an alcoholic father and dealing with and having all of these struggles. And so there's top shelf alcohol. So I was like, okay, well, top self, because it's also, something that I have been striving for a long time is how can I just get better? And then how can I help others if they want to improve some areas in their life as well? So that's how I came up with the name.
Okay, well, that's genius, and I love the meaning that you have behind it. So when I was trolling you, I was like, who is this gal that talks about all these insecurities and the jealousy? And I know in the workplace and, no matter where we are as women, there just seems to be this weird comparison thing going on. So I'm curious from your personal experience, which you used so much of to create your content and to help others move past that. What was it in your life that you saw was going on? You're like, okay, I need to deal with this.
Hmm.
We're
Well,
going deep, girl.
oh yeah. Well, okay, so I was actually kicked out of therapy many years ago. Well, more like invited not to come back, as they say. But I was seeing this therapist for a couple months, and it wasn't my first therapist that I ever saw, but I was seeing her for a couple months. And, I go in and every week we'd talk about, my abandonment issues with my dad and my struggles with jealousy and insecurity in my relationships. And every week I'd say, okay, and I promise her and me, like, all right, I'm gonna let that stuff go with my dad. I'm gonna be more secure in my relationship. I'm going to tell myself positive things every day. But every week I would fail. I would go right back to the same thoughts that everybody's, better than me, smarter than me, prettier than me, funnier than me, all of those things that we tell ourselves. And I go right back to it. And I go right back to being jealous in my relationships. And at the end of our session one night, she hands me a piece of paper and she says, "You know what, Shannon, we've learned a lot over the last, we've talked about a lot over the last couple of months, and it was good to get to know you, but I'm not seeing any progress. We're not moving anywhere, and this may be outside of my expertise, and so I'm going to ask to end the relationship." And I was like, "What?" Like,
Wow.
here I am coming to you for my insecurity and abandonment issues, and you're kicking me out of therapy. But it was actually the best thing that ever happened to me. So I got in my car and I opened up the piece of paper that she gave me, and I'm like wiping the tears from my eyes, trying to read it. And I see it says 14 characteristics of an adult child of an alcoholic. And I was
Oh,
like, oh, wait a second. Like, I didn't write this list. I thought I was the only one. I thought I was the only one that felt this way, that behaved this way. And so when I saw that there was a list, I knew there were other people that had this and had the same thoughts and behaviors that I was going through. And then, if there's a list and there are other people, there must be a solution. And so that's really, I started on the journey of, okay, I've got to figure this out because what I'm doing isn't working.
wow. Wow. Okay. What was next? Like, that is so
Yeah.
shocking because my first thought is you're like, okay, I have all these abandonment issues. Personally, I would have felt like I was being abandoned by the very professional that I hired to help me.
I did. I
Wow.
did. And, it went from shock and feeling bad for myself to kind of this anger, like, "Oh, okay, well, then I'll just fix it myself." But it really was a good thing. And, it ended up being a great thing for me because, like I said, I thought I was the only one. So if you would have said years ago that I'd be helping other people overcome jealousy, no way, because I thought I was the only person. And I also thought, well, this is just the way I'm made. This is just in my DNA.
Wow.
But what I realized, and I learned a very important concept, is it's your subconscious, it's the programming, it's these beliefs that we have about
Yeah.
ourselves that we create, especially from when people are in this dysfunction. As I was, my father was an alcoholic. He was violent and chaotic, constantly in the household. And so when you have that sort of situation where on one hand, when he's
Mhm.
sober, love feels really good and you want it. And then on the other hand, when he's violent and it's chaos and he's drunk, love is very scary.
Wow.
And my dad chose alcohol over his family for years and years. And so, of course, I'm going to have some of that abandonment issues of,
Right.
oh gosh, somebody picked this over me. So, if my own dad doesn't love me, why would anybody else? I must be
Ooh.
unworthy of love.
Ooh. Okay. That's going like right to the heart of the matter. Yeah, I struggled with that too. It was the same thing.
Yeah.
It was abandonment. And my dad was a high functioning alcoholic. Going deep in his story was he was adopted during the depression. Actually, both of my parents were given up for adoption. So they both had tremendous brokenness. And
Right.
my dad just decided to take his pain and drowned it in alcohol. So
Yeah.
it's really interesting when we grow up and we can understand the why, but it doesn't really fix the heart and the wounds. So what did you do next after
Yeah.
you opened up that sheet of paper and there was the 14, was it
Yeah.
steps? 14
14
characteristics?
characteristics of
Okay.
14 behavior characteristics of an adult child of an alcoholic. And
Okay.
you actually were just nailing it on the head of the thing because, yes, as an adult, we can go back and go, okay, I logically understand that my dad choosing alcohol is because he had this disease. He has this addiction. And
Mm,
he had that addiction because his father was an alcoholic, partly because his father was an alcoholic, or as you said, dealing with their own traumas, our
yeah.
parents dealing with their own traumas and them trying to figure out how to best navigate it. We don't always have the healthiest strategies from the get go unless we learn those healthy strategies. So, as
Mm,
an adult, it's easier to look back on those things, but it doesn't change the programming that is there. And so, the concept that I learned, and this is so Thais Gibson from the Personal Development School, where I got my certification, it's the biggest kind of note to understand is your conscious mind cannot outwill or over your subconscious mind. And your subconscious mind is where all of those beliefs are stored. So when I was going to therapy and I was saying, I want this so bad, I want it more than anybody. I don't want to be jealous in my relationship anymore. I don't want to have these feelings that I'm not good enough or I'm not worthy. I don't want to have this relationship with my dad or not have the relationship with my dad. I couldn't want it enough though, because that is a conscious desire. And all of my programming that tells me I'm not worth it, I'm unlovable, all of those negative things, that's a subconscious. That's in your subconscious mind.
okay. So I'm a little bit of a neuroscience, I don't know, like nerd.
Yeah.
Doesn't that fly in the face of how we can reprogram our brains and the neural pathways to think differently?
Yes, because the exact way, and this is where I think people get so frustrated and why people stay in a loop. Just like
Yeah.
I did, they think, I don't get it. I want this so much. I'm telling myself positive thoughts. I'm trying to do things to head me in the right direction. I'm journaling, I'm trying to let go of things, which is
Mhm.
all beautiful stuff to do that we should do. But that programming got there from repetition plus emotion. And so if we think about it, repetition plus emotion programs life's commotion. It's
Mm,
the same way we can reprogram it through repetition plus emotion. So,
mhm.
in my case, and I'll just use me as an example, growing up constantly thinking, I am not lovable, I'm not worthy of love.
Mm.
So, I constantly worried that my partner was going to cheat on me. Some of them did, many of them did, but I was also picking the wrong people.
Yeah.
But constantly believing my partner's gonna cheat on me or that everybody else in the room is better than me in some way, in any way, in all ways. And that was my belief that, I am not worthy, I'm unlovable. So I had to reprogram that to I am worthy, I am lovable,
Yeah.
just like it was programmed in.
Yeah. I love that. It's so interesting, because my story is just so similar. And but I had a God moment, and it was really, what are you believing about yourself?
Yeah,
Because I had been in therapy. Nobody ever asked me that.
right.
And I was like, well, all the things. I have a list. And he said, is it true?
Yeah.
And because I'd been raised in the church and been faith based my whole life, I thought, I've never stopped to ask that because what my parents said was really my truth instead of what I believed that God said about me. That was really pivotal for me.
Yeah.
So, what oh my gosh, this is such a fascinating conversation because one of the things that I love about you is that you are so willing to be open and super candid because these are hard things.
Mm-hmm.
And most people, whether it's a girlfriend, they don't want to be that vulnerable. You certainly don't in the workspace or in other community areas. But you actually help women so that they can thrive in all those areas of their life. What did you do
Yeah,
next?
we're definitely not putting it on our dating our dating
Yeah.
profiles, right? Like, I am jealous. I will look through your phone. I will, track you on location services. Yeah, it's one of the things that I find that is really the hardest for my clients, for listeners of the
Yeah.
podcast, because jealousy is such a taboo topic. There is
Mhm.
so much guilt and shame that
Yeah.
surrounds the topic of jealousy. And so a lot of the times they can't even talk to their best friends and their family about it.
Yeah.
And they sometimes can't talk to their therapist about it because they don't understand. And so when someone says, "Oh, I'm feeling this way," a lot of times there may not be any evidence in their current relationship of infidelity, but they are on a daily basis anxious and worried about it. And they're
Mhm.
looking through their partner's phone, they're looking at their emails, their social media accounts, they're,
Yeah.
checking their location, they're constantly questioning their partner. And that's when you know, okay, this jealousy and insecurity is really driving my life. It got to a
Mhm.
point with my husband and I when we couldn't go to a restaurant anymore. We quit going to restaurants, to movies. We couldn't go anywhere together. If we were at a restaurant, I was already scanning the room for what I considered potential threats before we
Wow.
even put in our name with the hostess. And so if at any point he looked that direction while eating dinner, it was an argument. I would instantly feel all of those, negative beliefs that I had about myself that I felt immediately triggered. And no matter what the explanation was, maybe he was just looking at the art on the wall or looking for where the
Yeah.
restroom was. What I believed is what I believed.
Ooh,
And
that's the
so,
root right there, right? What you
yes,
believe is what you believe.
it's what you believe. And there was no convincing me that I didn't see what I saw. But that wasn't the case. And even if it was, and because I get this question all the time, well, what if I do let this go and I don't feel jealous anymore, but what if they do cheat? What if they do or are doing the things that I'm worried about?
Yeah.
And the thing there is really, it's not so much we can't predict. We don't know if we're going to be with the person, our partner for the rest of our lives. We don't know if they're going to cheat on us or not. It's more the question of why is this something that you're so focused on and that's driving your life? And it all comes back to a me issue, right? It's a me thing that I have to look
Mhm.
inward for and start working on.
With the clients that you work with, what has to happen? Like, how deep do they have to go until they get to that point where they're just like, I can't live like this anymore. I've
Yeah.
lost relationships. Maybe I'm on the verge of losing my marriage.
Mhm.
How far does it have to go?
Yeah. That is usually when I get that client, is when their partner has said, "I cannot do this anymore. I can't handle this anymore. This is ruining
Wow.
our relationship." I mean, they're usually on the brink of, "Okay, I'm
Mm.
gonna lose someone else." And it's probably happened to them in the past in most cases. There are a few where this is a new thing for them that they're experiencing, but typically, they've been dealing with this in all of their relationships to some degree. Now, what is
Mm.
interesting is the more serious the relationship becomes, the
Mm.
more that jealousy and insecurity ramps up. Like, I used to be the coolest girlfriend for the first like 3 to 6 months until, if there became real feelings, that's when the jealousy would start to rise because now the stakes are higher for me.
Ooh, that is so good. The stakes are higher. As the
Mhm.
relationship becomes more serious, the stakes are higher. That's so profound. Okay, when is your book coming out?
I know. Yeah. I've had people ask me and they're like, "Can you talk to my partner who's struggling?" So I don't quite do that yet, but yeah. I mean, it's a very difficult thing because on the flip side of that too, you have a partner, their partner, the jealous and insecure person's partner they want to help them. They want to make them feel better. And this is where then the jealous person really starts to get into this loop that it's very much like an addiction because
Mm,
the jealous person has this desire, like, oh, I'm feeling insecure. I'm feeling extremely jealous. And I don't like this feeling. I want it to go away. So the way to do that, I've got to get this fix of reassurance from my partner, whether
mhm.
it's questioning them, whether it's looking at their phone to confirm or to say, "Oh, this isn't what I thought." So they get that fix from their partner, that reassurance, and they feel good again for a short amount of time, but then it just comes right back because it's not about the partner. So this poor partner is trying to constantly reassure this person because they love them and they want them to feel better, but unfortunately, that constant reassurance isn't really helping the situation, and both people just become frustrated.
I really love how you're breaking this down because identifying, yeah, you got the fix until the next time. Like, this is an addiction. This
Mhm.
is way worse than like a chocolate habit.
It feels very similar, and I think yes, I think most people would take the chocolate addiction over the
Yeah,
jealousy because it really is life altering. These people
yeah.
are anxious. It's bad for their health because they have constant anxiety. They're always on edge. And it
Mhm.
certainly is bad for their relationship. But
Yeah,
then just as any addiction, and jealousy, I say jealousy is not the problem, it's a solution because it's trying to say, hey, jealousy isn't the actual problem. It's saying you've got something that you probably need to go look at. And usually it goes
mhm.
right back to what we were talking about in the beginning is those beliefs that we have.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. In your coaching or in your own walk,
Mhm.
what surprised you the most about this topic of being jealous?
Yeah, I think what surprised me the most, and I talked about it just a little bit, is how shameful it is
Mm,
and how much, on both sides, how much people who don't understand it and experience it. And I
mhm,
just saw it was Instagram or TikTok, I can't remember, of this woman who was basically saying, "Oh, stop being jealous. Oh, you're so insecure. Just because I look good." All of the things, like kind of
mm,
almost bantering on another woman who was feeling insecure and jealous. But you wouldn't do that to somebody who was an alcoholic. You wouldn't do
mhm.
that to someone who was struggling with mental health in some way, in terms of
Mhm.
like actually poking fun at them, actually saying making them feel worse, and
Yeah,
actually making fun of the fact that they have this. And it's that was my most surprising thing of how badly people treat others for being jealous, and then how bad the jealous person feels, how much shame and guilt.
yeah,
Because when they feel shame and guilt, it's like you're feeling shame and guilt for something that happened to you as a child that created these situations that you didn't
yeah.
have any control over,
Mm.
right? I mean,
Okay,
you had no
I think
control
you
over
need to
that.
say that again. Sorry, you need to say
Yeah.
that. That's huge.
Yeah. When we don't want to talk about it, when we're feeling jealous and insecure and we feel like there's shame and guilt around it, it's understanding that this is something that happened to you most likely as a child that you had no control over.
Yep.
And so we're shaming ourselves for something that we had no control over. Now, that doesn't mean we don't have work to do for
Mhm.
ourselves, but to say there's shame, I should feel shameful of this or guilt around it, it would be the same as saying I was abused as a child and I feel guilt and shame around it, which guilt and
Yeah.
shame does even come for people who have been abused as a child. It's the
Yes.
same, right?
Yes.
And
Absolutely.
living
Yeah.
with an alcoholic, you're a child. You can't get out of that situation.
Right.
You're in it. You're stuck in it.
Yeah. And you don't understand it. Like it just it's not on your radar when you're like 8 years old that my
Yeah.
parent is an alcoholic and that's why they rage and that's why I'm in
Mhm.
such a toxic and unhealthy household where you just never know what you're walking into. Like, they don't teach that in 3rd grade.
No.
And nor
No.
nor should they have to, but it's coming to that point.
Yeah, I just read, I think it's like 1 in 8 children live in a household where at least one of their parents is an addict of some sort. So,
Yeah,
it's 1
that's
in
a
8
shocking
kids.
yeah,
Mhm.
shocking statistic. You know what I think surprises me the most in hearing you talk about this is how prevalent it is. Because we've all known, like, women can be catty and jealous and this and that. But hearing you talk about this topic, I'm like, this is way bigger than I ever imagined.
It really is, and, I got some of that feedback when I first started the podcast, and there were people like, "How are you gonna talk about jealousy for an entire like, how are you gonna be able to have things to talk about enough?" And there's not gonna be enough people that will listen. Unfortunately, there are, and more
Yeah.
than I even ever anticipated. And it's quite frankly part of how I started the podcast or thinking, oh, this way I need to talk about. I was just talking to an ACA group, Adult Children of Alcoholics, a women's group. And I just was sharing my story and like what it was like growing up and then how that affected me as an adult. And I talked about being jealous in my relationship. And at the end, all of these hands went up. They were like,
Wow.
"I can't believe you just said that, because me too." Like, I had no idea. And so it was like, woman after woman after woman saying raising their hand and saying, "Oh my gosh, I can't believe you were just talking about that out loud and saying that out loud, because that's me." And I thought, That's what I need to do the
Yeah.
podcast on." And so,
Wow.
yeah.
Wow. Okay, so that was a great setup intro and giving us kind of the higher level of what this is all about. We have so many people that listen to this show that they're in leadership roles or they want to be good leaders.
Mhm.
So let's shift and talk about how this affects people in the workplace. I know you've
Yes.
seen that and you probably have a whole lot to say about it.
Yes, because one of the things that and maybe this is like the most surprising, if I was talking about in the workplace, this is maybe the most surprising is we expect, like, we see all of the comparison in personal life and we see insecurity and we know that it's there and it exists. And then we expect people to show up at work and work in teams and collaborate with each other and everybody just get along for the organization, and we put people in um certain positions that it's very uncomfortable. How would I, if I don't trust in my personal life, people that are closest to me because I have abandonment issues or I have, whatever it is growing up, how in the world am I going to trust my coworker who, is here 9 to 5 and now I have a project with them?
Yeah.
And so I think us ignoring, the old saying, don't bring your problems to work, that
Yeah.
is never a thing.
Never. That's
We
silly.
bring them to work, and not just that, but we have behaviors at
Right.
work as a result of them. We don't change who we are because we show up to work. We may modify things, maybe we don't talk exactly the same, but the way that we do one thing is the way that we do everything. And if we have those deep down um, issues, then that's going to show up at work. And
Yeah.
you know, uh, so just we were talking about stats earlier. 86% of women don't feel like they're qualified to be leaders. 86. 86% of women don't feel like they're qualified to be leaders.
Wow. That's surprising.
Mhm.
That's really surprising.
Yes.
Yeah. Wow.
96% of women wouldn't call themselves pretty, and 7 out of 10 women you know just feel like they are not good enough in some way,
Yeah.
including their looks, but also their performance at work and in relationships. So 7
Well,
out of 10
culture
women don't feel like they're enough.
that's shocking. And culture and social media isn't helping. I
No.
was having a conversation with one of my colleagues, and we were talking about the pressure to be thin and pretty.
Mhm.
And I bring this up a lot, so I might be dating myself, but there used to be this commercial for perfume that said, "I can bring home the bacon, fry it up in a pan, and
Oh,
never let you forget
Ajate or
where I
whatever
am."
it is.
It was,
Yes.
ding, ding,
Yes.
ding, Shannon wins the prize. Yes,
Uh-huh.
yes. And I was like, that was probably what, early 80s, I
Yeah.
think? So that has been the story we have been hearing as women is do it all.
Mhm.
You have to do it all and be self-sufficient.
Yeah. And yes, I mean, we're definitely going against that. And we definitely know that there's more comparison when it comes to when women are comparing themselves to each other more than men are comparing themselves to each other, and for
Yeah,
different reasons, right?
right.
And when you have these types of things in your childhood, in your upbringing, it absolutely carries over to the way that you're performing at work and the way that you think about yourself. And I just think we're missing such great opportunity to hear from. I mean, it's going to keep us from speaking up, in a meeting, in giving our opinions, the way that we operate. All of that's going to show up. We also, when it comes to the workplace, we put males and females in situations that may be uncomfortable,
Mhm.
traveling together, all kinds of different situations that we just take for granted that it's okay for people to do. And some people are very uncomfortable with it.
Yeah,
Um, and, whether it's right or wrong that that person has it, what I'm saying is we have to acknowledge it because it's there.
right. Yeah.
Mhm.
I think just starting with acknowledging
Mhm.
is obviously the first step, but it's a really big first step.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Wow, this has been so fascinating. I'm just thrilled that we had this conversation. So, what's your best piece of advice for confidence building?
Mhm. So my best piece of advice is, because I think this is what happens most of the time, is we feel like I don't understand why I am not feeling different or changing or have some sort of transformation when I feel as though I've been doing all the right things. I'm saying positive things to myself. I'm doing all the right things. And what I really want people to understand is that's our conscious desire. And
Mhm.
so, yes, we can set a conscious desire. It's the same way if we go to the gym, say, I'm going to start eating healthy and I'm going to quit smoking, if that were on someone's list. And we're really good at it for 4 or 5 days. And then after that, we're eating cupcakes and smoking cigarettes again. People, we're not hitting our New Year's resolutions, many of us. And that's why, because we're going off of a conscious desire and then we make ourselves feel bad when we don't succeed at it. And
Mhm.
you've just got to go deeper to that subconscious mind because that is what drives all of your beliefs, thoughts, emotions, and actions. It's whatever that subconscious programming is. You have to go there versus the conscious desire.
Oh, that's good. What's next for you? What are you working on?
So, I have a group coaching program that I'm really um, would love to keep that going. We've had several rounds of it and it's been hugely successful. And people are like, wait, no, I don't want the 6 weeks to be over. At first they're like, commit to 6 weeks. Heck no, that's so hard to do. And then they are really, sad that the 6 weeks is ending. So, that and just focusing on the podcast, it's really hard to one of the things to get people to share the podcast because again, oh, I don't want to share this with a friend because then they're going to know that I'm jealous because it's a podcast about jealousy. So,
Right? Oh my goodness.
yeah, so those are
Yeah, I
my two
think
focus.
and I love it. Gosh, you've made so many amazing points. I've written 2 pages of notes here. Yeah, we don't want anybody else to know that we're not perfect, that we might be
Yeah.
jealous or we might be insecure. Like,
Mhm.
people,
Mhm.
Shannon and I give you permission to just be imperfect
Yeah.
so that you can be better.
Yeah.
right?
It's hard to solve for something if you're not talking about it, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
right? Oh my
Mhm.
gosh. Where can our listeners find you?
Oh, yeah. So go to topself.com and they can catch the podcast there. I've got some freebies on the website. There's a quiz that they can take to see what attachment style they are, or on Instagram at Top Self Coach.
Perfect. I'll have that all linked below in the show notes. Shanenn Bryant of Top Self, you are a treasure. I am so glad that you are one of my besties now, and I can't wait to see what you do next.
Thank you so much. And thanks for having me and giving a place to be able to talk about this. I appreciate it.
And you are more than welcome, and welcome back anytime.
Well, hey, friends, thank you for joining me for another episode of Candid Conversations on the Called to Confidence show. Be sure to check the show notes below where you can find Shanenn's contact info and also the link to my personal development program for kingdom-minded leaders, the Kingdom Confidence Method. And as always, friends, I'm wishing you every good thing.